This is the story of Inanna. Inanna was the queen of the upper world. She had many kingdoms and she was able to roam those kingdoms freely. Her people loved her. She was everything you would want a queen to be. She was respectful and kind and courteous and generous. And one day, Inanna was roaming one of her many kingdoms. And the special thing about Inanna was that she was the queen of the upper world, but she also had an ear to the underworld. And so while she was roaming, she started to hear a call. And it was one of those calls where it was undeniable. It was something she couldn't ignore. She couldn't distract herself from it. She felt it in her bones. And so Inanna goes back to her home and she decides, I have to go to the underworld. So then Inanna brought her high council around and she let them know that I have a call and I need to go to the underworld. And before Inanna could really even finish her thought, everyone in the High Council was telling her, Inanna, why would you leave this place? You have everything you could have ever imagined that's here. Why would you leave? You know, the people that do leave, sometimes they don't come back or they come back very, very different. And why would you want to leave, Inanna? Everything is here. You have everything you could ever want here. Don't leave, Inanna. Don't leave. We don't want you to go. Inanna gently assured them that, she needed to leave and she needed to go explore this call. So her high council said, okay, if you're going to go, we're going to give you tools and gifts to help you on your journey. So they gave her a big crown to protect her head. They gave her a headband to protect her third eye. They gave her a big lapis necklace to protect her words. They gave her a big breastplate to protect her body and her torso and her major organs. They gave her a big belt full of balms and tinctures and things that would help her if she got hurt or if she got sick. They gave her something to cover her pelvis, and they also adorned her with something to cover her legs. And so Inanna said, look, I'm going to go to the underworld, but if you don't hear from me in 3 days, please come look for me. And so that was the agreement. The High Council said, okay, if we don't hear from you or see you in 3 days, we'll come look for you. So Inanna started to make her way to the underworld. And the upper world was slowly starting to fade into the distance. And Inanna slowly approached the underworld opening. And as she did, she stepped over that threshold and she realizes that there's a gate. And it was unexpected. Nobody told her. Inanna kind of didn't know what to do. She was like, I can't go back to the upper world. I have to go in, but how am I going to how do I do this? How do I get in? So as Inanna is looking around, she's looking at this gate. She's trying to feel around. And, as she entered the underworld, it started to get a little darker and a little colder. And So there were lots of things happening that Inanna wasn't really expecting. But as she's feeling around on this gate, an entity appears. And as this entity appears, it says, if you would like to pass through, I need your crown. And Inanna took a step back saying, no, like these are adorned to me and given to me. These are my gifts to help me on this journey to the underworld. I have a call to the underworld and I'm not sure why, but I'm I can't give you, I can't give you these things. They're not for me to give. They were gifted to me. And the entity says, if you want to pass through, I need your crown. So then Inanna stops and thinks, okay, well, I suppose I can give up my crown. I have lots of other tools and lots of other ways to help me. So I can give you my crown. And so she hands the entity her crown and she passes through the first gate. As she walks through the first gate, she starts to think, are there lots of gates? Nobody told me I would have to give anything up. And as Inanna keeps walking, it gets colder and it gets a little darker. And then Inanna hits another gate. And as she's looking around for a door, as she's looking around for a handle, an entity appears. And the entity says, if you would like to pass through, I need your headband. And at this point, Inanna realizes that she's going to have to give up her headband and she might have to give up more of her gifts that were given to her. And so Inanna reluctantly gives the entity her headband and she passes through. And now it's getting colder. It's definitely getting darker as she makes her descent. And then she reaches the third, the fourth, the fifth. The fifth was the hardest because the fifth was her tool belt that had all of her tinctures, all of her herbs and lotions to help with any cuts and scrapes and sickness. And by that point, Inanna is naked from the top up. She doesn't have anything. And it's definitely getting cold. And it's getting harder to see. And Inanna's feeling a little disoriented because she's trying to make her way to the underworld and she wasn't expecting it to be like this. And she gets to the sixth gate. And then she gets to the seventh gate. And at this point, she's pretty much naked. She just has some cloth covering her legs, and the entity tells her, if you want to pass through, I need your cloth. I need your cloth that's adorning your legs. By now, Inanna is tired. She's been on this journey for a while and she's thirsty and she's hungry and it's dark and it's cold. And so Inanna gives the entity the cloth that adorns her legs and she passes through the last gate. And Inanna is just, at this point, she's so fragile. She's so tired. And so as she's in this last room, she starts to hear something from the corner. And it's like this emoting, and it's this crying, and it's this. Oh. And Inanna's too weak to go see what it is. And she's kind of scared. She's like, there's something else in here with me, somebody else in here with me. And as Inanna tries to slowly move her body from the ground to maybe explore and see what it was, an entity picks up Inanna and hangs her on meat hooks. And so Inanna is in this room where it's dark and cold, and there's something else in the room with her. Inanna spends one night hanging from the meat hooks, and she spends another night hanging from the meat hooks, and she's weak. She's barely holding on to life. And Inanna is just thinking, what have I done? What have I done? The upper world was merely a memory now that was fading away very quickly. And Inanna is met with her new reality. But on the third night, Inanna starts to feel a shift in the room. And she realizes that her high council is there. And right as she feels that, she goes, that's right. I told them to come look for me, and they came and looked for me. And now they're here, and they're going to save me. And right as Inanna had those thoughts, her high council passed her. They went right to the moaning and the crying that was still happening the whole time Inanna was there. And her high council surrounded the woman on the ground, and they held her, and they kept her warm, and they gave her water, and they fed her, and they listened to her. And Inanna couldn't make out what they were saying, but they were there for a long time with her. And as the woman started to have more life in her, have more vitality in her, she stood up and she went right over to Inanna. And she brought Inanna down from the meat hooks. And as she does that, Inanna realizes that it's her sister. And Inanna couldn't believe that her sister brought her down from the meat hooks, because Inanna was the reason her sister was in the underworld. And as she brought her down, her sister gave Inanna water and gave her food and kept her warm and held her and listened to her. And finally, when Inanna started to feel more alive, had more life in her, they embraced and they hugged for a long time. Inanna's sister told her, "Thank you for coming for me. But now it's time to make your ascent back to the upper world." And so Inanna, naked, starts to make her way back to the upper world. And as she starts to make her ascent, she's thinking, what does it mean to be reborn in the underworld? Do I even want to go back to the upper world and the life I had before? It doesn't even feel like it was my life. It feels foreign yet familiar. She can barely remember the sights and the sounds that she was so accustomed to in the upper world. Inanna starts to make her way back to the upper world, and it starts to get warmer and a little brighter. And as she goes through gates, at a few gates, entities gave her gifts for her to bring back to the upper world. And they were different gifts than what she came with. So Inanna gets to the first gate, starting to get really bright, really warm. And as she steps over that threshold into the upper world, Inanna lets the sun hit her face. And she thinks, who will I be now? And that's the story of Inanna.